Last winter, in a small snow-covered town tucked away between winding mountain roads, something extraordinary happened. It began on one of the coldest nights of the year, the kind of night when the icy wind cuts through coats and every breath turns to mist. Most people had locked their doors, drawn their curtains, and settled in with the warmth of their fireplaces. But not everyone was so fortunate to have a roof and a heater that night. Out on the lonely road, a group of 20 bikers rode through the blizzard, their engines struggling against the freezing air. They weren't hardened outlaws or menaces as people might assume at first glance. They were just travelers, caught off guard by the storm. Their leather jackets and gloves no match for the biting cold. Among them was their leader, a tall man with a thick beard named Mark. He had led countless rides across the country. But tonight he felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. His riders were exhausted, their fingers numb, their bodies trembling, and their spirits fading. They needed warmth, but every inn they had passed was closed. And no houses seemed welcoming enough to take in a crew of 20 strangers in the dead of night. Then, almost like fate, they saw a dim light glowing from the window of a small wooden house on the edge of town. The house was old, its paint faded, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of the snow. It belonged to Margaret, a 73-year-old widow who lived alone. She had lost her husband years ago and had no children of her own. Her days were quiet, her evenings lonelier. And though she often felt forgotten by the world, she had never forgotten her husband's words, "Always open your door when someone is in need." When the bikers stopped in front of her home, their headlights glowing like restless fireflies in the storm, Margaret's heart skipped a beat. She peered through her lace curtains and saw the rugged silhouettes of men in heavy jackets, their motorcycles parked in a line like sleeping beasts. Most people in her position might have felt fear 20 strangers at her doorstep in the middle of the night, but Margaret didn't hesitate. She saw not outlaws but human beings frozen and desperate. She pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders, opened the door, and waved them in. "Come inside before you freeze to death," she said. Her voice gentle but firm. The riders hesitated at first, unsure of how she would really react once they stepped into her home. But when Margaret guided them toward the warmth of her fireplace and offered blankets, hot tea, and bowls of soup she had prepared earlier for herself, they realized her kindness was genuine. The small house, once filled only with silence, now overflowed with laughter, gratitude, and the sound of boots drying by the fire. Through the night, stories were shared. Mark told her of his brotherhood, how they looked after each other on the road. Another rider confessed he had lost his family years ago and had found a new one in the group. Margaret, in turn, spoke of her husband and the long winters she had endured alone. Though separated by age and life paths, they discovered a bond in shared pain, resilience, and the simple human need for warmth and compassion. By morning, the snow had eased, and the bikers prepared to leave. They thanked Margaret again and again, promising they would never forget her generosity. She smiled, thinking that would be the end of it, a night she would always remember. But a night that would fade into the past like so many others. But the story was far from over. The very next morning, Margaret was startled by a low rumble that shook the walls of her little house. At first, she thought it was thunder rolling in early, but when she looked outside, her eyes widened in disbelief. Lined up along the road, stretching farther than she could see, were motorcycles, hundreds upon hundreds of them. Over 1,000 bikers had come, their engines roaring in unison, the sound echoing through the valley like a wave of thunder. Word of Margaret's kindness had spread quickly through the brotherhood. The riders she sheltered had told their story, and soon, bikers from across the state decided to honor her in the only way they knew how, by showing up, not to overwhelm her, but to stand as a living tribute to compassion. The sight was overwhelming. Big, bearded men with leather vests, women with bandanas and heavy boots, young riders just starting their journeys, all stood outside Margaret's home, not with menace, but with respect. They brought food, supplies, firewood, and even helped repair her aging home. Some worked on fixing her broken porch. Others shoveled snow from her driveway. They filled her pantry until it overflowed and promised her she would never spend another winter alone. Margaret stood in her doorway, tears streaming down her face, her frail hands trembling as she waved at the sea of strangers who now felt like family. She had given 20 men shelter for one night, but in return, she had gained the loyalty and love of 1,000. From that day on, the bikers never forgot her. Every year they rode back to her house, not just to check on her, but to celebrate her as one of their own. And for the rest of her life, Margaret was never alone again. She had a family bigger than she had ever dreamed of, bound not by blood, but by the power of kindness and the unshakable belief that even the smallest act of compassion can change the world. The story of Margaret and the bikers spread far beyond the town, reminding everyone who heard it that appearances can deceive, and that sometimes the roughest exteriors hide the warmest hearts. It was proof that when you open your door to others, you open your life to miracles. And in the end, Margaret's little house, once quiet and forgotten, became a place of hope, remembered by thousands as the home where one woman's selfless act lit a fire that never went out.